Hello, everybody. Hope we're all doing especially well. Just in case everything is broken, because everything likes to be broken in the world of YouTube, that's how things work these days. If you can hear me, can you just pop like a number 1 in the chat, just to make sure that everything is running as expected? If you can't hear me, then that's all good. I just don't want to dive into the main bulk of everything without everything actually working. Whereas if you don't, then that gets a little bit scary. Anyway, let's get to my stupid face. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. And in a sentence that I've not said for a little bit of a while, we've got a little bit of transfer news to discuss. I know, it's been so long. This one is specifically surrounding a player the Leeds fans have a confusing relationship with, potentially going to a region of the world that the world has a confusing relationship with, so it's worth a little bit of a deep dive into. But before we do so, I'm just going to ask, if you wouldn't mind, I'd massively appreciate you popping a like on the stream, commenting, subscribing, becoming a channel member if you fancy, all that fun stuff, and that'd be absolutely lovely. Thank you very much. Anyway, to deep dive into things, first off, we need to talk about the player that's potentially on the move, and that is GNONTO, who has a lot of interest in him currently coming from Saudi Arabia. Which typically you have a look at that and you think that's a scary set of words, because when the Saudis want a player, they tend to get the player because they're able to just throw an obscene amount of money at both the selling club and the player themselves to try and get the personal terms that they want, which tends to work out for them. Good afternoon, Michael. And in this case, the player that they have their eyes set on seems to be GNONTO. So we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into why they might have an interest in GNONTO, the sort of fee that it might take to shift him, and in addition to that, what this could actually mean for the club going through the rest of the season. So, first off, why do they have an interest in GNONTO? A lot of this comes from the way that Saudi clubs have sort of worked for a while now. And this isn't looking at sort of the initial go where they were just like, okay, we'll sign Ronaldo, we'll sign Brozovic, we'll sign Alex Telles, we'll sign everybody. This is more what their strategy has been in recent times. So since the original wave of people, they've slightly changed the way that they do things, in that a lot of Saudi clubs will now instead take the approach of incredibly promising young player that is currently playing in Europe, let's sign you and you can grow and develop over in Saudi Arabia, because the idea is they're not only signing these players to do the sports washing, which everyone sort of assumes is the only way that they're doing this, they're also doing it to grow the game over there. Which makes sense, but you also need players that aren't just going to blow the Saudi players out of the water, hence someone like a GNONTO would be the ideal signing for them. Now, this is where things get into slightly complex territory of the clubs that have an interest in signing him, and there are 2 of them, and I'm just going to pull both of them up so I can get a proper idea of everything. Why can't I find that one? Very weird. Sorry. I'm a little bit thrown here because I don't know if Neom actually exists on FBref, which makes things a little bit tough. But we'll give it a shot anyway. So there's a couple of sides that have an interest in signing GNONTO. The first of which is found around here, Al Ittihad. Al Ittihad being a fairly strong side that have reasonably high attendances, which is a little bit weird, and have done so based on the fact that they've just been able to sign some pretty good footballers because they are one of the state-owned clubs. Begone advertising. Currently, they have played a decent amount of football so far this season, but come out of it with 9 points. They're not quite top of the table, but if you have a look at some of the players that they have signed, you can tell that they are one of the teams that is happy enough to sign those high-profile kind of guys. So, specifically, this is... sorry, the stream was showing is a little bit broken for me there, so I just want to make sure that everything's working. Thanks, YouTube. I'm really glad that you're breaking again. I appreciate that. So, they've got the likes of Danilo Pereira over there, who is a very clearly good player. They've got Fabinho over there, Moussa Diaby and N'Golo Kante. A few of those are on the older side, though, so Pereira and Kante are getting towards the old end and the end of their contracts, which means that they're going to come to the end point of, now we need to get a new raft of foreign talent in, because they're only allowed a set amount of foreign footballers, which confuses things a little bit, but It's kind of interesting. Like, Benzema being 37 and a half years old means that they're going to look for a new forward at some point, someone to put the goal in the goal in the back of the net, the ball in the back of the net, and that is going to be a potentially Benzema, but you never know. Then you come to Neom, and I'm going to have to find a past game from Neom just to get an idea of why I can't actually find them. So apparently they're just above Al Tawoon. I used to watch a surprising amount of Saudi Pro League as well. Are they Al Sakhor? Is that what the team was? Yes. Okay. And the other club that have a little bit of an interest being Al Sakhor have got, again, a decent amount of talent to them. So Hegazi doesn't really count as one of these players, but Lacazette is over there. Simon Boabre is over there, who's a very, very good, young, promising footballer. But they're not quite as built up with the international players because they're a relatively new side, as we can see by the fact that they're not even called Neom on here. If we have a look at the news behind them, they got taken over by Neom in 2023. Football club will be turned into a company and ownership transferred to Neom. Neom being just a city. So it's effectively another state-owned club, but it's not owned by the PIF, which is a sort of interesting approach to things. Play the first ever match on the 28th of August, which is where they've been able to sign in so many newer, gooder players in the incredibly immediate term. But GNONTO looks to be one of the next players on their list of players to potentially sign, which would make a hell of a lot of sense because they have a little bit less in terms of that international talent base. The question is, what does this mean for Willie Gnonto, and what does this mean for Leeds United? And in my opinion, this could be a little bit of an issue. Because what Leeds are currently struggling with is the fact that we needed more attacking talent anyway. We needed another winger in or another number 10 in towards the end of the window, and we didn't get it. So if you're able to sell one of those players, that's not necessarily the best of things, because if you end up selling one of your very few players, you need to sign a Gnonto replacement and another winger and potentially another number 10. Which I'd call a little bit of a problem. That would be incredibly difficult for us to sort of make work. So hopefully we're able to do something with that. However, it would open a significant amount of PSR room. So see Gnonto leave, fine, that could potentially be a problem, but if we sell him for something like 20 million quid, assuming that we sign replacement players over 5-year contracts, that turns into £100 million of budget. Admittedly, that doesn't account for the wages, but it opens up a significant amount of room, and there is the potential chance that we might have to sell someone in the coming months anyway, just to sort of bring that squad rebalancing back in, because again, we are a little bit heavy on the left wing. We've got Okafor, we've got Gnonto, we've got Harrison, but on the right we've got James and we've got Aronson, ? I think Aronson's been pretty good this season, but I think that's very clearly not the best position for Brendan Aronson to be playing in. Ultimately, I don't hugely mind if we were to sell him for a decent sum of money. If we don't end up signing him for a reasonable sum of money, then that would be a little bit of a problem, because that wouldn't open up all of the PSR room that we necessarily need to, because it would just keep us a little bit restricted, a little bit tight, a little bit struggly. But I think we're probably going to land in the right place with it. Whether or not we do sell him, I've got no idea. It's going to be effectively impossible to tell, because you just can't say. The way that Leeds United work at the minute is baffling, because everyone can see that there's a hole in the squad, and yet there's not movement to fill the hole in the squad, which means that everyone's sort of questioning, okay, is that a thing that necessarily makes sense? I don't know. It's a fair point. If we get 30 million for Willie, we can bring in 2, and bringing in 2 probably solves the problem. But is one of the 2 just going to be a Willie Gnonto replacement, which is a little bit of a problem. Maybe one of the 2 becomes the right winger, which is, okay, cool, a little bit more of a rebalance over to the right-hand side, and then you get a number 10, or something along those lines. We need to use the assets that we've got to hand right now in a more effective manner, because what we've done in terms of selling players up until this point is we haven't. Zurich have a 40% sell-on clause, did they? Let's have a look. Oh, go away. Fairly sizable stake in an onward transfer. Okay. But even then, that opens up a reasonable amount of cash, and odds are it's going to be based on profit rather than sort of the pure funds, because the majority of these are based on like profit. If you sell a player for 20 million but you've only bought them for 10, you're not going to want to give another club 50% of a sell-on clause. If it's based on the pure sum, it's going to be on profit, which is my immediate assumption. However, that's still going to be absolutely massive, so the higher the fee, the better. That big sell-on clause isn't ideal, but it's something that I think we're going to have to deal with, because at the same time you don't necessarily want to lose a guy for free, especially when they're one of the better assets. It's like I was mentioning in terms of like not using our assets really effectively enough recently. If we've got a case of Ilham Meslier potentially going to go on a free move as opposed to moving for a vast sum of money, which I think he should be, you've got Lorient interest, you've got potential Rennes interest. Why would we not try to sell? We're very, very bad at selling, and if we can get a decent sum of cash from, let's be honest, one of the easiest buyers to negotiate with in world football right now, being the Saudis, because they're happy to just throw money into a pile. We know this. And like in terms of PSR over there isn't any. It helps us drastically, and it means that we can get a little bit of a flow going in terms of, okay, so we can in fact sell players that we quite like in order to get a decent amount of money and buy in players that we will like in the future. We won't immediately have an emotional connection unless it's Edouard Spertian, in which case he is my GOAT and he will never be questioned. But we get that sort of flow of players in, players out, making a little bit more sense than it has done before, which I think is going to be something that's quite important. I'd be asking you 40 just because of the sell-on clause, but he's not worth 40. That's the thing. We can ask 40 all we like, but if you ask for £40 million, you do not get £40 million at the moment. Purely because the amount of football that he's been playing and the fact that when he's been on the pitch he's not had that much of an impact is a bit of an issue. Like, you've seen the transition from GNONTO playing to Okafor playing, and it's vast. And if you look at the fact that Okafor we've managed to get in for about 17, admittedly, a bit older, less potential, all this kind of stuff, it gets a little bit rough, because GNONTO really wasn't doing anything up until that point, but he's not worth 30 either. This is where it gets a bit questionable, right? Because I think there's an argument that to a lot of clubs in Europe he's worth 20. For the Saudis you had a bit of a premium, and you had a little bit of a premium for the fact that he's clearly got a high ceiling and he's got a lot of potential to him. So he's still young, he's still got a long way to come in the world of football, and to sort of tar him with the brush of he's not playing that much right now, that'd be a problem, isn't something that I think a reasonably well put together footballing outfit says. So like Neom SC, because they keep doing SC rather than FC, which is absolutely irritating, because it shows that the word soccer is sort of taking hold, and I hate that. They've sort of built everything based on, can we be consistent? Can we have a very, very good squad in place? Can we build everything in the way that we need to do it? So I think if they're looking at someone like GNONTO, they're going to be saying, okay, he's got potential for the long term, the very, very, very long term, because he's quite young, and they don't tend to just get players in and go, you'll do 1 year and then piss off, because when that happens, the Saudis don't get particularly happy. And the way that the tax laws work mean that if a player leaves within a tax year, they end up having to pay tax on everything that they earned when in Saudi Arabia. I think it's the rest of this tax year and all of the next tax year that it works for. So I don't see that necessarily being the approach that they take. I think it's a case of if they want GNONTO, they're going to want GNONTO for a while, and I think they'll be willing to invest something like the 30 in that case, but it's kind of hard to say. Looking back, I'm a little bit on the fence about the fact that we could have sold him for about 40 million quid. That feels like that is one that we could have done at the time, and we could have done with the income from. So if we sell GNONTO for 40, then we don't need to sell Archie for 40. And in the time since, yes, he's been a reasonably good player for us, but in neither season have you thought Willy GNONTO is the guy that is going to win us games of football. So if you have a look at, if I can, please just work. There we go. So if you have a look at last season, he got himself 9 goals, which is good, to be fair. However, he wasn't in our best 11 for me. If you have a look at the season before that, he was good. He got 8 goals, but again, on the left he was outdone by Somerville. The season after that he was outdone by Solomon. On the right-hand side, I personally have him behind Dan James. Like, they do different things, but at least in the Championship, I leaned towards Dan James as an alternative. It's a bit rough. And it gives us a very, very big question that we need to answer, which is, what is the plan with players that we have an attachment with that have a little bit of value to them? Because we've not got a ton. Like, the players that have value at Leeds United right now, there's a few, but there's not all of them. I don't know. Everyone's saying Gnonto should be playing because he's been in the Prem before, but that was in a crap team. He was the only shining light. He wasn't even the only shining light, because we also had Somerville. I think because if we have a look at the season in which he was the shining light, he scored twice and he got 4 assists. That isn't screaming fantastic player to me. Like, that was over the course of 15 90s. And sure, he was 18 years old. I get it. He was a young player that had a lot of developing left to do. But I don't think he's lived all the way up to that potential. And I think whilst he's got that potential to him and he's got a bit of time on his deal... How long is Willie Gnonto's contract now, actually? Is it 4 years? I'm going to have a look. Spot track. Leeds. Give me a second, and I will find this. It's just going to take a moment. But whilst it does take a moment for Spot Track to load, because for some reason it hates me, I'll go Apology instead. I would massively appreciate if you fancied popping a like on the stream. It's massively appreciated. And also stick around in the coming days for the Football Manager streams, because there's more rumours that the Football Manager beta will be coming today. I don't think it will, but if it did, I'd be very happy, because then it's something to do. Do you think Dan James dropped performance because we changed formation to 4-3 and not the 4-2-3 we had before? No, I think that he wasn't playing with full fitness. I don't think it was a case of moving as if he was affected by the system. I think it was more a case of he was moving because... I don't know. I can't really phrase it very well. But you know what I mean, right? I think it's a case where he wasn't 100% fit, and that less than 100% fitness was causing a problem. Gnonto, by the way, currently has a contract up until 2028, so he's got 3 full years left on his contract. I'll have a look at who's got the fewest, because we know that we've got 3 goalkeepers in Sam Byram with 1 year. But in terms of the players that have 2 years on their contract, we're going to have to do a bit of renewing, I think. He never had a pre-season. That's a good point as well, yeah. Turn the clickbait in. What clickbait? It's not clickbait. It's a case of Saudi clubs have an interest in a player. This is fact. Well, at the very least, it's widely reported as fact from fairly reputable folk. And I'll be honest, I trust the Jer filter, which is if Jer does a thing on it, there's probably a source behind it. Therefore, I'm saying it as there is interest in a move for Willie Gnonto from Saudi clubs, which could potentially lead to an exit. Hence, Gnonto to Saudi, ? Which opens up a lot of PSR space, and I think would be a genuinely very sort of maybe a good idea. I don't know. Surely Gnonto knows he needs to step up a gear and kick his career on. He needs to grab that right wing spot before James is back. Yeah, but he also needs to be fit before James is back, and that's a little bit of a stretch. Joe wouldn't report if he didn't think it was true. Yeah, like in terms of like reputability levels, I trust Joe to like understand sources and everything as much as anybody. Like, he's a very consistent guy when it comes to double checking everything. Looking at contracts, by the way, the players with 2 years left, you've got Strauch, who could probably do with a renewal. You've got Aronson, who I will be honest, I would renew, because I think he's been fairly good this season. Maybe not for the wages that he... Well, then again, 45k a week isn't that bad for Premier League wages. Ampadu's got 2 years left, and I would definitely be renewing that one, thank you very much. Piru has 2 years. Mecha has 2 years, and Gruev has 2 years. So maybe I'd look at a Piru sale. I think there's something in I also think Gnonto wants to play on the left. I think that's part of the issue, because Gnonto wants to play on the left and has discussed this in the past. Okafor wants to play on the left and has discussed this in the past very, very openly in terms of like big interview settings. And they can't both exist at the same time, because for me, Okafor is the player that you lean towards in that situation. If you're leaning Okafor versus Gnonto, you gotta go towards Okafor, because Okafor in the game so far has already shown something that was beyond what Willie Gnonto was doing. And we need to recognise that, like, when it comes to... How do I phrase this one? When it comes to Premier League talent, if you've got someone that is visibly a cut above, you've got to play them over the player that is like, well, they've got potential, because as much as a player might have potential, that doesn't mean that they're in the place to do the good thing yet. Like, they're still potentially a distance away. Like, the number of players that we've seen coming through and we've gone, maybe not, is ridiculous. Gelhardt is one example, because he's the next person on the list who has 2 years left on his contract. Is one of those players where everyone was like, oh, he's going to be fantastic for Leeds in the season that we survived, and Rafinha set him up and all this kind of stuff. And then he kind of wasn't, because he wasn't good enough to start in the Championship, and you can't afford to drop points in the Championship where you don't need to. And then he sort of stagnated a little bit. And I'm not saying that Gnonto is at that level of sort of stagnating, because Gnonto has had minutes, but Gnonto still hasn't reached that ceiling that we know that he can have. Which says that, is this the right environment for him to try and reach that? Which is a bit of a question mark. Can we return to our chat about England and Ireland last night? No, we cannot, because I don't know. We just can't. I've decided. And this is a dictatorship. If you ever thought this was a democracy, then you have been lying to yourself for quite some time. But of those, I think, if we're looking at 3 players that we potentially sell, I'm going to quickly run this as a poll. Which of these would be your first choice of sale? And we know there's interest in him. We knew that there was interest in him. And he's got 2 years left on his contract. It's not the way that I would have necessarily phrased that one, Sean. 3 players we potentially sell are Gnonto, Tanaka, Strauch. I don't think Tanaka. I think Tanaka's looked completely fine this season, to be honest. There's no pressure to sell him. And I think he's good enough to not need to be in the conversation to go. But if you haven't, chuck a vote in. Interestingly, everyone's roughly even at the minute, which I think is quite fun. Never mind, it's leaned a little bit in the Peru direction. Oh, it's leaned heavily in the Peru direction. We got 10 votes, and 60% of which are saying Joel Peru. Okay, that's fair. With Gnonto 20%, Strauch 20%. I think Peru going is one that makes a bit of sense, but do we need to sign a new striker in the event that we sell Joel Peru? I'm going to leave that as a question for you guys. Would we need to sign a replacement? Just for PSR-wise, for the price we paid, the price we could get. Yeah, maybe. Why sell our best finisher, silly fan base? Because it depends on if he does the rest of the stuff well enough. That's where it gets a little bit complex. Because you can be really, really, really good at finishing, but if you're really, really, really not good at being in the position to create the chances to finish, that's where there's a problem. Because I do agree that he's up there as one of the better finishers, but he doesn't really get the chances in the first place. I'm in the same spot as the 78 RPM saviour. I like Peru, but he's not necessarily what we need in the Premier League. Because I just don't think he is. It's not what he does best. Oh, I need to sneeze. Ow. Can put him on as a sub if we need a goal. Yeah, sure, but the number of times that people said across the summer, like, oh, we can't just be signing players for the bench. This is functionally the same thing. You're choosing to have someone sit on the bench rather than get the money for them, just in case you need them. And I'll be honest, off the bench, I don't think we immediately look at Piru. I think we instead go, Mecha has that physicality to sort of bring the hold-up play and make sure that other players are able to flood forward and cause some problems. There's a decent chance that that is maybe a better shout. At least GNONTO can go at defenders and cause problems. Don't think Aronson can do that. We lack some attacking on the right. Aronson isn't a winger. I'd say he's a different format of winger for me. Is what I'm going to call it. He wings differently. Which is a weird way of saying it. But we need a good squad. I know we need a good squad. But that's partially why I think if we need to sell anyone, which I think we probably should, and then reinvest, I think if you get 2 players that are of a decent standard in exchange for a Piru, if you get a dedicated number 10 and a right winger in for selling Piru, I think that's worth it. Because it just it shifts that balance a little bit in a way that we don't have right now. And I think if we weren't to do that, we'd invite a big threat to ourselves. I look at it like this: with Piru's got 40 up for Swansea before we got him. Why didn't Prem side come in for him? Because he's not a Prem player. It's a bit harsh. There's players all over the place that like no one comes in for. Like at the same time, with a little bit of a counterpoint, you could say, why hadn't anyone signed out Tanaka by the time that we signed him? Clearly, he's not a player that's any better than the Bundesliga 2. It could just be a case of, well, we saw him as having value for us at that stage, which is rather sell Pascal, who ain't at the level, in my opinion. I accept your opinion, but I firmly disagree with it, is the way I'm going to put that. And I'm going to put it down to one little statistic. And that is the fact that statistically, based on like expected goals against, our defence is better than Liverpool's this season so far. And is only worse than Arsenal, Newcastle, Bournemouth and City. We have the 5th best defence in terms of expected goals against this season, which is real good. In terms of expected goals, come on, face. Expected goal difference, yeah, we're not doing too fantastically because we're not creating as many chances as we necessarily hope, but because Rodon covers him. Yeah, but at the same time, when Rodon makes mistakes, Strout covers him. It's to look at a defensive unit that features your captain, sort of, well, one of your captains, one of the captaining unit, and say, yeah, well, clearly we can just get rid of him. It feels a bit of a risk. Because we're not at all a bad side at the minute. I wouldn't want to change that defensive unit right now, purely because doing that would feel a little bit knee-jerky. And I think there's other players that you can just sort of ditch. Yeah, that's a good point. Sure, you've just argued for a deep squad. Who's going to be the backup centre-back? Because at that point, you're like, it's going to be Bourne out. Okay, what if one of those gets injured? Whereas I think doing that sort of reshaping the attacking region makes a bit more sense. Because then you can get rid of one of your forward players, like a Piru. Then you get 2 replacements in who are both also in that attacking region of the pitch, and shift things about a touch, which I don't mind. No, we don't cover him. Well, hang on. Right, let's go to there. Where's the numbers I'm looking for? No, yeah, that'll do. You can say that, but having a look at tackles numbers between all of our defenders. Rodon has attempted 5 and he's won 3. Pascal has attempted 4 and he's won 4. Occasionally his position will be out, sure. But it ain't half bad. Rodon is good with the blocks. He's good with, especially particularly shots. He's good at throwing his way and throwing himself in the way of stuff. But I don't know. Be all born out. Ampadu can go in at centre back at a push and put Tanaka in midfield. But even then, you don't necessarily want to do that, because if we're talking about needing a strong squad, I don't know. Trouble is, stats make you sound like Jesse. I don't think they do. I just think they make you sound like someone who knows stats. I think everyone that jumps to the idea that, like, if you're talking in stats, you're talking in Jesse Marsh. We can't let one useless dickhead interfere with the way that we look at the game, for me. And it's clearly a very, very, very useful way of dealing with things. Not on an individual game basis. The issue that Jesse Marsh had was that he would look at matches and go, these are the numbers from this match, therefore this outcome. That's not how that works. Like, you can get some idea of, like, the quality of chances, but then again, there's little bits of fuzziness around all of that. What you can mainly do with, like, numbers like this is you can look over an extended period of time, so it normalizes a little bit, the extended period being like 5 or 6 games of football, and then you can get a better idea of, okay, so what are the patterns? And I think with the pattern showing that in terms of expected goals against, we're pretty fucking good, it's fine. If you sell Piru, we still need to buy. I think you also get more money for Pascal. I disagree, to be honest with you. I think if you sell Piru, sure, you still need to buy, but you would still need to get a centre-back to cover for Pascal Struijk. Whereas if you sell Piru, who is, let's be honest, at this point, primarily more of a 10 than a 9, if we need to play someone as a straight-up number 9, he's third in the list. If you need to pick someone as a 10, he's maybe second. So you sell Piru, you replace him with a 10 and a right winger. You would still need to buy either way. Whereas Piru going means that you can just buy those 2 attacking options as an alternative, whereas selling Struijk means you need to cover for one of the defensive options. You can't just lean quite heavily into the attacking players, which I think is where we need to improve. I think if you're looking at this squad right now and you're saying that the defence is the problem, I couldn't disagree more, to be honest. In fact, let's have a look at expected points. These are just X points. There we go. So in the expected points table, we're currently about 10th in the league. We are about 2 points below where we should be, and a significant proportion of that will come from the Bournemouth game, because in terms of XG, we're pretty damn good. But it's creating chances that we're struggling with right now. The defensive side of things, we're fine. It's just that other way around is where we've got a little bit of an issue coming. In terms of getting more money for Pascal, I'm not convinced. I think it's a case of, if you get to January, you're in a better market for attacking players than defensive players. Problem is, up top I agree, because DCL can't hit a bound out. Right, Sean, this is how I know that you didn't watch my video a few days ago. I'm going to call you out on it. Okay? I'm going to show you the numbers to your face, so you can't deny them. Let's go to shooting stats. Where are we? If I can find them. Pass types, passing, shooting. There we go. Go over to monitor 2. Premier League shots. Go to player stats, right? Let's go to shot on target percentage. Remind me, Calvert-Lewin couldn't hit a barn door, right? Calvert-Lewin, horrible accuracy, as far as you're trying to argue. And in terms of compared to other forwards, he's the 3rd most accurate forward in the league. Everyone's saying that we should have signed Liam Delap. He's more accurate than he is. More accurate than Hudson-Odoi. More accurate than Haaland. When you have a look at shots on target per 90, he's behind Semenyo, Mateta, Haaland. He's the 4th best for shots on target per 90 in the entire Premier League right now, which ain't half bad. You can't be too mad at that. In fact, let's get it proper. Yeah, judging by number of 90s, actually. So we've got a decent judge. We'll say someone that's played at least 3 90s, because otherwise you get various subs. Like Ungamoa has had 1 shot on target. So say, but he played 9 minutes, so shot on target, that sample size, not great. We'll put Cunha in there as well, who's played roughly the same amount. The only forwards that he has less shots on target than, after playing a decent amount of football are Erling Haaland and Matthias Cunha. I'm not going to be too mad at that. How many of them did you daisy cut to the keeper? I don't know. I can't remember every single shot on target. But what I do know is if you're saying you can't hit a barn door, you can. Maybe it's not going into the corner. And maybe that's a thing that'll get worked on, because it is. Because it's going to take a little bit of time for him to get onto full form. Because he didn't have that full pre-season. But I think he'll get there. And I think to counter that, if we go to... show me Leeds, show me previous season. Let's go shooting stat, shall we? Shots on target per 90. The only player that is anywhere near close is Largy, and that's because he played relatively little football towards the end of games when we're chasing a win. He gets, at least compared to a side that was known for shooting a hell of a lot, another 0.6 shots on target per 90 than Peru does. Shot on target percentage, no one's anywhere near. Charlie Crew, there we go, he's the closest. How much more time can we give him to start scoring goals? He has scored. That's the thing. Like you can't expect a forward to score every single week, especially when the teams that we've played in those weeks. If we have a quick look. In fact, we'll go specifically to Calvert-Lewin, right? So Calvert-Lewin's matches so far this season, if I can get to them, because I'm zoomed in further than I like to be, but that's okay. Cool. Didn't start this match. In that time, he's played Tottenham and Bournemouth, who are going to be qualifying for Europe. They just are. Played a bit against Fulham. Scored against Wolves. These are some difficult games of football. So to have a look at all of this, I've just realised I'm not on this page. So to have a look at all of this and go, right, we've played Tottenham. Well, he should have scored against Tottenham. Well, he played Bournemouth. He should have scored against Bournemouth. Played against Wolves. Those goals don't count. It's nuts, to be honest with you. You know, goals means plural. You know, Sean means dickhead. No. So I think for within 5 matches, 3 of which were against sides, well, 2 of which are against sides that are actively in the Champions League, and one of them is against a side with the best underlying stats in the league right now, being Bournemouth. I think they're in the top 3 or something like that. Is a bit harsh because the sample size is ridiculously small, and I think he'll get there. Might just take a little bit of time, but I don't know. We need to have a little bit of patience because we can't be looking at what's been going on with Premier League clubs that have just been promoted in recent years and seeing, well, clubs that get promoted just immediately go back down. And then when it comes to us, go, yeah, but he should be scoring a goal every other week. And if he doesn't, then he's shit. Like, that's not the reality of the situation. He's at a new club. It's going to take time to bed in. In addition to that, he's played against some difficult sides with some very, very good goalkeepers. Vicario is a fantastic keeper. We all wanted Petrovic. And Petrovic made some banging saves in this game of football. But everyone forgets that. It's a little bit of a shame. But I think he's the best option that we've got right now. I don't know. And it is down to Metch to put pressure on. As you've said, 78 RPM saviour. Like Peru did. Because Metch is going to get time off the bench. He just needs to actually use that. And that front line still needs to all click together and everything needs to mesh a little bit and it all has to start adding up a little bit more. But when Okafor has had more minutes in his legs, as he has done recently, when Calvert-Lewin has had more minutes in his legs, which he's growing into, things are going to start clicking that little bit more. And I'm going to enjoy it, to be honest. And Aronson is still getting used to his new role as well. He's a very, very, very good player in those wide areas. But he's not quite as there as we might like it yet. But it's fine. It'll get there. In fact, I want to see who gets those. Okay, cool. Sorry, I had to check something then. He had chances in those games and bluffed those chances. I never called him shit. I love the rest of his game, I promise. I just wish he scored more goals. He will do. That's the thing. Like, eventually the goals will come. There is a reason that over time XG levels out and people revert to the mean, because he's not as sharp as he will be yet. And once he's sharp, he is going to get that cutting edge, and he's going to start causing a lot of problems for a lot of sides. And we just need him to get there. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there for now. I might do another stream later, depending on if Sean doesn't mean Dicker. That's why my mum called me Sean. Ah, I knew it. I knew it. That's one of those secret little tricks of the Irish language. But I'm going to leave that there for now. Depending on if the Football Manager beta comes out, I will potentially do another stream later on. I don't know yet, because this is one of the big question marks. I don't know whether it's coming out tonight or not. They keep hinting at it, but if it doesn't, then I don't know if I'll do a stream or anything. We'll find out. I'm going to leave the end of the sentence because I've lost it, to be honest with you. Going to leave that there. If you enjoyed, please pop a like on the stream. You know that is massively appreciated, like deeply, because YouTube keeps not recommending anything to anyone, which is a bit of a pain. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe, become a channel member and all that fun stuff. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all. I've already pre-ordered it. I'm just waiting on the beta now. But I will see you all later. Toodaloo. Also, hype. Apparently that's a thing, but I've not seen it yet. But that'd be nice. Thanks, guys. Bye. Ah.